I thought we turned to one of our favorite media writers. He's a fantastic journalist, a great writer, works at Pirate Wires, wrote one of my favorite books about the ills of journalism, The Gray Lady Winked. Joining us right now, the great journalist, Ashley Rindsberg. Ashley, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, John. Always happy to be with you.
All right. So this has been, for those of us who have tried to sound the alarm about the state of media, this has been a somewhat satisfying week because, the combination of evidence for the Washington Post, the admission by the New York Times, it sort of puts into perspective that the narrative that all the media got it right, it's just the conspiracy theories that have it wrong. The conspiracy theorists seem like they're the professional journalists now.
Yeah, exactly. It's this great flippening. Everything's kind of flipped over where we're seeing these things come to light. The things that you couldn't say or talk about or even question without being called a conspiracy theorist not that long ago. Turns out these were actually the facts.
It's just remarkable. I look back and while I see these spontaneous admissions where we see some corrections, at least the Washington Post did corrections, is there been a reflective enough moment in the industry to figure out how things got so wrong? Hunter Biden laptop story, the entire Biden story, the Joe Biden senility story, Russia collusion. Has the legacy media done enough reflection to try to course correct, or do you think they're just on the same path?
Oh, they're absolutely on the same path. I think that the only thing that has kind of given them a little bit of hesitation or pause is that they've had trouble finding a new narrative to cling on to because they've exhausted every other narrative possible. But they have done no retrospectives, no analysis, no soul searching regarding any of the major scandals that you just mentioned. I mean, each one of those on its own would be something to study for years, if not decades. And there's just been no self-reflection and no awareness and no honesty at the end of the day. It's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's remarkable because honesty and factual accuracy was really the coin of realm, the coin of relevancy for the news media, but they seem to have spent it away and they don't even seem to care that it's gone. Caitlin Collins, I sort of look at her and I say she's sort of the foil of the new era of journalism, willing to ask the planted question, even if it means getting demolished because you haven't done your work. Talk a little bit about the counterpunching that the Trump administration has been able to do with mainstream reporters in the last few weeks.
I mean, we're seeing the Trump administration do the kind of stuff that the Obama administration did with reporters that they didn't like, and nobody really said much about that at the time. Actually, it was considered really justified by the media itself when they were shutting out Fox from interviews. And that was considered fair play. It was encouraged by the media at that time. And today what we're seeing is similar. The Trump administration is pushing back. And I think, it's easy to spin this as an issue of free speech, et cetera, or fairness, that kind of thing. The reality is that these are the outlets that staged an illegitimate attempt to basically smear the sitting president with falsehoods, not in 1 or 2 or 10 or 20, but in hundreds of news articles across thousands of hours of footage making claims that were never substantiated about his collusion with Russia or alleged collusion with Russia. What they were saying, what they were accusing him of was treason with no evidence. And to the contrary, in many of these cases, they were not only false, but they were just patently absurd. These things just didn't hold up to the most basic scrutiny, but they pushed it anyways. And as we all know, they did it at the behest of a sort of dark arts political and public relations agency run and paid for by Hillary Clinton. This is as malfeasant as it gets. And at that point, you got to say to yourself, well, there has to be some comeuppance.
You would think the comeuppance doesn't seem to occur from the normal policing agencies of journalism, the Pulitzer Committee, the Journalism Standards Committees, not even the journalism standards editors at newspapers. For instance, we've been trying to reach out to the Washington Post news standards editor for today to find out, are you going to correct the story based on these new documents? And they don't even care to respond. the correction or the penalty seems to be coming in the marketplace where readers are peeling off. Is that ultimately going to be the final penalty and maybe the course adjuster for journalism in the future, which is people abandon longtime brands for new brands that have a better record in accuracy?
Yeah, we're already seeing that. I mean, this is already underway. And a colleague of mine, a journalist, my editor actually, was saying how despite all these different scandals that you had mentioned earlier on the conversation, that there's been no consequence. And I was kind of saying, well, actually, we're seeing the consequences play out in real time. We're seeing independent news organizations just like yours rise because audiences, readers it's not even an issue of trust anymore. It's basic credibility that they no longer can place in these news organizations. They say to themselves, this outlet is not credible. What they're telling me, forget trust, because trust is something implicit where you say, if this news organization says it, well, it's true. They're looking and scrutinizing and say, I'm going to default assume that it's not true. And that means that they've got to go elsewhere. And they're going to places that have a more neutral point of view, fresh voices, fresh faces, and reporting that is based on evidence. I mean, it feels like we're in a topsy-turvy world where this is something novel to say that reporting should be evidence-based. But that's actually what's going on.
It does seem like it's the exception, not the norm anymore.
It is the exception, exactly. And people that were sort of jettisoned out of mainstream news organizations that have gone on to start their own outfits are the ones that are seeing the fastest growth, because that's exactly what readers and news audiences are looking for today.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's so well said. You just got it on the money. It's amazing to watch when you look at it. All right, talk a little bit more about how this New York Times article sort of slips in. I think it's about, if I count it right, like 500-600 words into the story. Oh, there was no proof for substantiation for the Russia collusion story. It's kind of a backhanded way for the New York Times to suddenly come out and acknowledge what they won an award for wasn't true at all.
This was really remarkable. It's one of these moments where you read it and you read it again and you say to yourself, did they just say what I think they said? And the context here is the New York Times did a news article about Daryl Cooper, who's an amateur historian. He's creating waves with what some might consider to be revisionist history about World War II, et cetera. In the article, the journalist writes that Cooper had his rise around 2021 when audiences started to see or started to feel some sort of angst or anger about the Trump-Russia accusations. And here's what the Times says. They said that these claims were never substantiated. They didn't say that Daryl Cooper was alleging this. The journalist, the New York Times, in a news report himself writes that the claims regarding Russiagate were never substantiated. That is a breathtaking claim to make in 4 words between dashes, 500 words into the article, as you say. And nevertheless, they've done it. They've kind of just shoehorned in this idea that it was all basically fake news. And again, we're not talking about 1 or 2 or 20 or 30 articles. We're talking about 7 years of news reporting. It was basically the only thing that they had to say about Trump for this entire period. Now they're quietly, almost in a whisper, saying that none of it was true.
It is pretty amazing. It is pretty amazing. And it's sort of symbolic of the journalism of the era, which is if you get it wrong, hide it and admit it somewhere, and then point to it when someone says, well, you haven't really admitted, oh, well, we mentioned it in graph 33 of this story. It used to be that when you got a story wrong, you fixed it publicly and overtly and apologized for it. But today we seem to be in a different place. Ashley, I want to go back to something that's a little older. But I've always meant to ask you about it, and now that I get you on the phone for the first time, I want to weigh in. Back, I think it was in December or January, I can't remember when it was, but Wikipedia suspended some of its editors and team members over evidence that they were perhaps involved in either anti-Israel or anti-Semitic posting or historically inaccurate posting that was to the detriment of Jews, Israeli citizens, and sort of smacked of anti-Semitism. It was kind of a moment that didn't get much attention. I think maybe the Jerusalem Post covered it and a couple others. I think we covered it, but these two editors being banned was a pretty significant moment. Tell us a little bit about what's gone on with Wikipedia, not only on the anti-Semitism front, but also in the way they treat conservatives, because there's a distortion on there that I don't even recognize myself on Wikipedia. I don't even look at it anymore because it's so demoralizing, but it seems to be an idea that has gotten hijacked.
Wikipedia, we get this kind of notion that it's open to all and decentralized and anyone's crowdsourced, and nothing is further from the truth. In any given topic area, you could say American politics or Israel-Palestine, you could have, and this is actually the case, a very small handful of editors who are controlling most of the content in that topic area. So within American politics, you had this very strong anti-Trump, anti-conservative bent. And whenever it was challenged by a very courageous editor called Atsmi, who was then completely just banned by the left-wing editors from editing in that topic area. And that's how they deal with dissent. And this goes contrary to everything Wikipedia stands for, theoretically. But that's the reality. And the same thing on Wikipedia on Israel-Palestine, where you have about 40 editors who work together, they coordinate together to edit thousands of articles. So we're talking about close to 850,000 edits made across 10,000 articles having to do with Israel, Palestine, and Jews. And it was mostly to basically try to sever all connections between Jews and the land of Israel, to whitewash the crimes of the Iranian regime, to smear Zionism as something that was inherently racist. And these types of narratives that were being enforced by this cabal or gang of editors that were just running roughshod over these articles for clear ideological purposes.
Yeah. It's important to note that Larry Sanger, one of the co-founders of Wikipedia, has been incredibly critical of the very platform he created, saying it's been hijacked. And it does seem not to have much impact on it. The hijacking continues, but it clearly is there. You do a lot of big thinking, and I think, when you look at The Gray Lady Winked, I mean, there's just such, not only a thoughtful compendium of the journalistic problems that the New York Times has often skated past without much accountability. But you do a lot of thinking about how are we going to fix journalism? How do we fix it? In the era that we are, there was a moment where I think people thought, well, at some point, the Washington Post and New York Times and NPR and CBS and CNN, they're going to wake up and realize that this is a bad business model. But it seems like too much time has passed. They continue to bleed subscribers and readers, and they don't seem to change course. Is competition the ultimate solution to the journalism profession, or is there some other ideas that maybe haven't been fully put into motion yet that would fix what our founding fathers thought was an important thing in America, which is newspaper and free speech was going to be key to the democracy that we built?
Competition, I think, is the starting point. I think nothing happens without that people have alternatives. But I think that's the key, is having an alternative, not just in terms of the news organizations, but also in terms of things like the prizes, where we talked about the Pulitzer Prize, which is very much a part of the same ecosystem as the mainstream media. We need an alternative for prizes to recognize the great journalism happening outside of the mainstream media. We need journalism schools outside of the mainstream journalism schools that funnel students into these same 6, 7, or 8 news organizations, where students are trained with different methodologies and a different kind of ethical code than what has traditionally been done. All that kind of, all those features of the broader landscape require alternatives. That's kind of where we are just seeing the beginning to bubble up. There are alternative prizes for journalism. Some of them are really great. There are alternative schools, but we need a lot more. And I think this is where we're going to start to see a real alternative to the mainstream media, something that is just as robust and fully funded and as culturally rich, but operating on a different set of principles.
That is a moment that will be greatly welcomed, I think, by the reading public, the viewing public, the listening public, a moment of reckoning and reconciliation and fixing ahead. Hopefully that happens soon. Ashley, real quickly, how do people follow the great work you're doing? You are really one of the most influential journalists, particularly when it comes to media coverage. You do such a great job.
Thank you so much, John. I'm on Instagram and X at Ashley Rindsberg, and Substack as well, Ashley Rindsberg at Substack.com. And of course, my reporting at Pirate Wires, where I do the investigative stuff. I did a big piece recently on Reddit infiltration by Hamas-linked propaganda network on Reddit. The Wikipedia stuff is over at Pirate Wires, and a lot more going on there. So that's where you can find me. And I'm always open to comments and suggestions. My DMs are open on X. I'd love to hear from people.
Yeah, well, you are a must-read, must-follow journalist. You do great work. Thanks so much for joining us today. What a great conversation we had.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Ashley.